Hello Internet, my name is Ren. This is Ren Rants, a channel where I rant about many things that I care about with a particular focus on pop culture and politics. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Orville Season 2, Episode 7, Deflectors. I will be doing a brief, spoiler-free section where I just talk about the episode generally with no plot details. Then I'll give you an on-screen spoiler warning before I get into the nitty-gritty of this episode. One caveat, though, is I have been really sick this week, and there have been a bunch of just crazy emergency situations that have come up with myself and my friends, and it's been a wild week. So I am behind again. This is going to be a bit of a rushed review, but I didn't want to get super behind, so bear with me, okay? Alright, so my spoiler-free opinion of this episode is that it was pretty good. I think it had some really good stuff going for it. It definitely followed in that Star Trek tradition of having a really progressive storyline that links very directly to social issues in real life. And it was very reminiscent of some episodes that I'm pretty fond of TNG. I would say it didn't really do anything super new or revolutionary with the storyline, and I do also think the episode had some significant weaknesses to it as well. For one thing, I think that this episode's a little bit too similar to other episodes that we have seen with this culture in this series already, and I don't know, it just felt a little bit stale in some areas. I kind of wish they had gone with something a little bit fresher and more new, but kept the same core idea. And so I wasn't as impressed as I wanted to be with this episode, but I also wasn't super disappointed either. It was an enjoyable episode. I certainly wouldn't give it a skip. And I would say that the parts that it did well, it did really well. There were some interesting moments in this episode where I didn't quite know where they were going with things, but then when you put it all together, it makes a lot of sense. I think they did a good job with the mystery element to this episode, and the main plot of this episode is pretty strong, even if it is fairly derivative. I wasn't a huge fan of the B-plot this episode, because I understand that it was necessary to progress the story forward, but meh. There just wasn't that much to like about it, and I am getting a little bit tired of so much cringy relationship drama in these episodes. I understand what they're doing. I still really like the Orville, but I just think that they could be a little bit more polished, and it would be nice if they stopped relying on so many of the same jokes over and over again. So I think that was a bit of a weakness in this episode for me. So there was nothing that really made this episode stand out, and I think that episodes like A Happy Refrain or Home are still a lot stronger. But this episode had some potential, and I think that it had an important message that should not still be relevant today, but is still very relevant today. So that is my spoiler-free opinion. I really can't say much more without talking about the episode in detail, so from here on out, there will be spoilers. You have been warned. I would suggest going to watch the episode, but I am just a person on the internet. I can't stop you from doing anything at all. Okay, so this episode was more separated into an A plot and a B plot. The overarching A plot mostly concerned a Mocklin engineer named Lokar assisting the Orville with a deflector upgrade. And so a lot of stuff stems from his presence on the Orville, and it ends up being pretty interesting. I think I'll talk about the A plot second, because the B plot is something I really just want to get out of the way. So the B plot is just that Kelly breaks up with Cassius, and he doesn't take it very well, so he keeps messaging her because he wants to talk to her, and he sends her a cookie bouquet and a giant alarming talking plant, and finally corners her in the mess hall and gets her to talk, confronts her, asks her if she's in love with Ed. She's pretty cagey about her answer. She doesn't say yes, but she doesn't say no either. And so Cassius decides to finally give it up, and he's going to transfer to another ship or a space station or somewhere to head up a teaching program elsewhere. So we tie the Cassius and Kelly relationship up in a nice little bow, and so that arc is over with, and now we can go back to the will they won't they with Kelly and Ed. So that's the B-plot. Left some stuff out. Ed kind of tries to play the supportive best friend role, but is honestly pretty obviously gleeful about Kelly and Cassius's parting. But there's nothing in that that's really fresh or new. It's just a retread of pretty similar dynamics that we've already seen before. So I wasn't super impressed with that. I also wasn't super disappointed with it. It wasn't terribly executed, it just also wasn't particularly well executed. It was still funny, it was still fine. I still have love for these characters, but I'm ready to see something new. The A-plot is more interesting and very much reminds me of the Next Generation episode The Outcast, in which Riker falls in love with a member of a gender-neutral species. I think they were called the Janai, and the person he falls in love with identifies as female, which is seen as incredibly taboo and unacceptable on that planet, and anyone who's found out to have those kinds of feelings is actually put through a form of conversion therapy. So it obviously was meant to link back to issues with the LGBT community, with gay people, with transgender people, and it was a very salient and well done story, even if Riker has always irked me. I kind of love to hate him, but Riker's always just bothered me a little bit. I can't quite put my finger on why. So this episode's general premise is very similar. Obviously the Moclans are a species that is entirely male, except for a few outlying females who are usually surgically altered to conform to male physiology. And so obviously attraction to females or outside of their species would be seen as extremely taboo. So the general idea is that Lokar has come aboard the Orville to help with a deflector upgrade, and while he's staying aboard the Orville, he gets close to Tala and develops feelings for her. He confesses his feelings, and while she's reluctant at first, she eventually reciprocates. They go on a date in the holodeck. There's some walking and dancing and kissing. It's very charming. But Tala's called away to take care of something, and while she's gone, we see Clyden enter the simulator and confront Lokar because he's seen them together and it threatens to report him to authorities on Moklis. And then we think that it looks like Clyden has actually killed him, but it turns out that Lokar was actually faking his own death so that he could get away and avoid persecution on Moklis. But because Clyden is innocent, Tala has to find Lokar and turn him in, even knowing what's going to happen to him if he goes back home. She does find him, and she almost begs him to seek asylum on the Orville.
But there is another choice. Request asylum aboard the Orville. The captain will grant it.
But instead, he tells her that he's going to go back and face the legal system, and whatever happens to him will be on her conscience.
No. I will go home. I will face him. And if I am condemned, it will be on your conscience, Salaki Ali.
And it is this really heartbreaking moment for her where she has to do her job and uphold the rules of the society she's in, but she also hates to see someone she cares about going back to an uncertain and likely unfortunate fate. Because when he returns to Moklis, his life will basically be over. So he returns to Moklis and faces his condemnation, and Clyden comes to Tala to thank her for revealing what happened and saving him from being prosecuted. Tala basically tells him to go to hell.
And because of you, his life is over. For no reason except your own prejudice. So as far as I'm concerned, you can go straight to hell.
Because Lokar wasn't hurting anybody, he was just trying to live his life and experience the same things that everyone else wants, which is love and acceptance and freedom to be who you are. So the storyline was pretty well done, and I thought that that was very well executed. It gave us a really nice opportunity to focus in on Tala a little bit more and get to know what kind of a person she is. And the more I see of Tala, the more I like her. I do miss Alara. I thought Alara was fantastic, but Tala has a lot of strengths, and I think her being a more mature character gives her potential for some more dynamic storylines. So I like that we get that from her, and I thought her performance in this episode was really solid, and the connection she had with Lokar was adorable. I did want to see them work out. I was hoping that Lokar would maybe ask for asylum and we'd have a third Mochlin aboard, a fourth Mochlin aboard. I almost forgot about Topa. But it was not meant to be. I will say, I understand what they're trying to do by doing so many episodes with the Mochlin culture that they've created, because it's an interesting culture that lends itself well to complex stories about sex and gender and attraction and all of these things. But it was very similar to what we saw in About a Girl, and the conclusion of that we saw in Primal Urges. And so having a third Mochlin episode so focused on this, when we've already had 2 this season, and we've already had at least 1 really Mochlin-focused episode last season, I think that I would like them to move on for a while. One thing I did forget to talk about in this video is that Lokar is Bortus's ex-boyfriend, and he's very cagey about why they broke up. He simply tells people that they were incompatible, but of course he reveals later on that they broke up because he found Lokar in the embrace of a female.
I decided to surprise Lokar. It was there that I found him with a Thetan woman. I knew it was wrong, but I loved him, and I did not want to see him destroyed.
So he knew all along about Lokar's orientation, but he kept it private because he loved Lokar so much he couldn't bear the thought of him being hurt. We see that there's another bump in the road for the relationship between Bortus and Clyden, because when Clyden returns to their quarters after his conversation with Alara, we see a pretty disdainful and disappointed look directed to him from Bortus. And it's interesting that Clyden's bigotry is something that continues to be a problem with their relationship, because Bortus is generally, overall it seems, more open-minded than Clyden and more willing to listen to other perspectives and reevaluate his own culture, whereas Clyden is not nearly as critical of their culture. He wasn't as critical of their culture with what happened with Topa. He wasn't as critical with their culture with the victimization that inevitably happened to Lokar because of his actions. And I think that it's one of the stronger parts of the show overall. So I do understand why they keep returning to it and why there are these ongoing problems, because they want us to see that relationships aren't just, one little problem and then you get over it and everything's fine. Things can impact the relationship a lot further down the line, and the same behavior can impact a relationship again and again. And so we have to wonder if this is going to be what finally makes Bortus give up on Clyden, or if we'll see them continue to try and work on things, and if maybe this will be one of the turning points that pushes Clyden towards a more open-minded worldview. Okay, so I'm sorry if I forgot anything. I know it was very rushed and pretty out of order, but I did enjoy this episode. I think there's a lot to discuss in this episode. If you have seen Star Trek The Next Generation and you saw the episode The Outcast, do you think the Orville did it as well or better? Do you think it did it a little bit worse? What kind of differences did you see between the two storylines that I didn't talk about? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you like my videos, subscribe. If you don't, I am sure you'll tell me. See you next time.